Okay, so hopefully this is the final session on 118. There's a point in every sugya where it becomes stagnant, and I'm reaching the stagnancy point. I don't know, whatever. Maybe something will jumpstart it, but like I've got too much. Also, I just want to give a PSA that I don't know anything. I don't know that I do know. Oh no, but how? Yeah. But yeah, I don't know anything about Tehilim, and I don't know anything about this. So just want to make that clear. Like, just doing my best here.
Right.
Yeah. No expectations.
No worries.
Okay. Yeah. So
Hard to talk to.
oh, I have. They also don't know. So before we review everything that we did, the last thing we did was we were talking about David Melch's statement in 1:6. I think it was 1:6. Let's see. Hashem li lo ira ma ya'aseh li adam. So Hashem is with me. I will not fear. What can man do to me? So our question was basically when we learned this 2 weeks ago. Wait, this is Tuesday. Last time was Thursday. So when we learned this, yeah, a week ago, we thought it meant that that no one can take away David Melch's bechira. He can always choose, and that's true. But then the question I had, kind of from the Stoic stuff, but it's not dependent on that, is the Torah does hold there's an objective good, which is to live in line with your nature, to pursue Yedias Hashem, Haska V'Yadosi, whatever you want to say, whatever that is, it's objective. And it seems like people can harm you, So if a person like incapacitates David Melch and makes him not able to think or like not able to, whatever, then takes away his knowledge, then that is an objective harm. So how do you reconcile those two things? It seems like people can do stuff to him. So what we said is that it's true that that's the objective good, but the objective good is not really relevant to us. What's actually relevant to us is the good that we can actually obtain, and that's only something that's within our nature to choose, or within our capacity to choose. So being bocher b'tov is really the good for us, and being bocher b'tov, the tov being like living in line with blah blah blah, right? So no one can actually harm him in that. You could take away from him like objective good, but that's no different than the fact that like, yeah, if I lived in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, I'd be able to ask him questions to get more knowledge. Does that mean that I am in a state of bad right now? Well, from an objective standpoint of perfection, yeah, I could be more perfected with him, but that's irrelevant to what my capacity is, because I can't time travel, so I can't be Moshe Rabbeinu, So like he can't. So no one can actually do anything to David to actually deprive him of the ability to be bocher b'tov. And that's what it means no one can do anything to me. Okay, now let's see if that stands up to Smart's question. All right, hold on. The Smart's question that emailed me that very night is, I have a follow-up question to our discussion in shiur just now. See, it was on that very night. That's a good tip, by the way, is if you have a question, write it down then, because it's never going to be as fresh. About Tehilim perek 118 pasuk 6. According to my understanding, our explanation of the pasuk was that David was saying that people cannot interfere with his ability to choose the good, or maybe a corresponding idea for Klal Yisrael. Had to their doc. That seems to be like a funny thing to emphasize for the following reason. It seems to me that the tov is the end goal, and being bocher b'tov is a means to that end. It's true that from a daily decision-making perspective, all we can do is make choices, but David sounds like he is really free from the effects of other people. What can man do to me? And I don't see why he would feel that way. People can do things that objectively harm him, even if he can still choose the best path from within his new worst circumstances.
That's a good question.
Yeah. So how do you answer that?
Right. I was writing down a question.
Good. Taking it to heart. Kamar, do you have an answer to your own question?
And just to clarify, the question is basically, our answer doesn't seem to fit with the
Yeah, and I agree that she's putting the thrust on the way he sounds, which is, I'm invincible, no one can harm me. So the question is like, does the idea that we said, even though there's truth in it, does it warrant that degree of like, no one can do anything to me?
Right. Well, he doesn't say, I'm invincible, what can man do to me? He says, I have no fear, what can man do to me? So I feel like that's like still in line with our idea, like, meaning he's not saying I'm invincible.
Right.
Like, yeah, I know man can do something, but like God is with me and I can always choose the good, so I have no fear, because relative to what people like think man can do to them. Man can't like do anything to me.
Okay, so that actually opens a path. Okay, look at pasuk number 18. Yeah. Yasori Sarani Yah Vlamavet Nasanani. God has chastised me exceedingly, but he's not giving me over to death. So there we said that was David Melch's way of relating to things that happened to him. You know, so you could do stuff to him, but as long as he can convert stuff that is done to him into opportunities to into mutter and to opportunity as opportunities, to perfect himself, to seek knowledge of God, to like do tshuva, then it's not a harm.
Right.
And I think the fact that it's an objective harm doesn't change that, because like if someone does something to you that harms your body and you learn from that, or like you change you do tshuva, or you like change your decisions or whatever, they really benefited you. I mean, they prompted you to give you an opportunity to benefit yourself.
Right.
You know, but I'm thinking about it because of what you said is the fear thing. Like yeah, people can do stuff to him, but that doesn't lead to a fear.
Right.
You know,
because the only thing he cares about is whether he's
doing good. Yeah.
Right. It's not like he said, "Man can't do anything to me."
Right.
He said, "What can man do to me?"
Right. But doesn't that imply that they can't do anything?
I feel like if he said that by itself, then it would imply that. But because he said, "I have no fear of what can man do to me," it's.
I mean, can we still go with the idea that the me is the part that's bocher b'tov?
Yeah.
And man can't do anything to that. Why doesn't that work?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean that's all right. It's just right. Last question. Good question. Like,
is it a good question, or is it just we're too attached to the wrong answer? I don't know. I'm asking that genuinely, meaning like,
what's the wrong answer?
The wrong answer is that the me is the body, or the me is the emotions. You know, like it's a very powerful answer, or a very powerful like premise. You know.
Well, no, I guess I'm saying if there actually is an objective bad, and that can happen, then it seems like forgetting the body is just bad for my fellow again. So it seems like I would be able to be.
Right, but that was our move, though. Is that what's bad for your Tzalma Lakim is irrelevant.
Yeah.
We're not talking about, or David Melch is not talking about the objective reality. He's talking about his subjective ability to do the good, no matter
Right.
his objective reality.
Meaning like I was saying, like not being in contact with Nevi'im is bad for your Tzalma Lakim.
Yeah.
You know, so is God like doing wrong to you?
Right.
And I honestly don't know if I'm blending the
Okay.
Stoic idea with the Torah idea. I don't know. I didn't mean to use the word blending. Sorry, that's just in my vocabulary now. Yes, Mar.
I think that I kind of like I get the answer from the perspective that almost anything that someone can do to you is not really going to interfere with your growth or perfection or whatever if you have the right mindset, like the thing you were saying about 18. But I think I don't really understand the other aspect of what you're saying, which is that like the essence is the ability to be bocher b'tov, because it still seems to me like a means to an end, and to have that be the sort of main thing, like I'm just not sure why he would focus on that.
Because you can't control the end.
Yeah, but people could still harm you with respect to the end. And it just seems like,
yeah, I hear the phone.
Well, I mean, that's the same. I mean, isn't that the Stoics' point? Is that like, yeah, you can't control it, and therefore don't care about it?
Yeah, but is that the same thing as saying that they can't harm you? Because Stoics are saying that you shouldn't care about it, and then they're also defining the good only as like choosing right. You know, is that really what the Torah is saying or not?
I mean, we're just saying choose good as opposed to choose right. Like,
Well, but we are assuming that being having more knowledge with it is like better.
Right.
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 So
Which
we could have
Stoics are not.
we could have less. Did you say this is a crisis?
Crisis. Can you explain what you mean by crisis?
Is this like for you? Is this something fundamental that you're like something that you're unsure of is fundamental to?
Yeah, but that's not how I define crisis, though.
Okay.
That's like my thing before you.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Uh-huh.
crisis would be. I think a crisis would be if it if it threw off my ability to live,
Mhm.
or if it interfered. No, not even to interfere with the fundamental premises.
Mhm.
Meaning, like, the options are very clear to me, you know, and I don't see any like nafkamina that changes what I do.
Uh-huh.
I think because I'm grounded in a Michelet framework, and this doesn't interfere with that framework, then I don't think it is a crisis.
Uh-huh. Okay.
That's frustrating.
It's not even frustrating. It's slippery.
Slippery. What do you mean by slippery?
By slippery, I mean that like it is hard to think about.
Right.
It's hard to wrap my mind around. Like every time I feel like I got it, then what appears like a new question rears its head, and then I feel like it's the same question, you know, which means that there's something I'm missing, you know.
Uh-huh.
And then the other thing also is like I feel like this is, you know, I think that Rabbi Moskowitz always said that like if you find yourself like you know, going about life and then you realize you haven't questioned the fundamentals in like many years, then that's a really bad sign. So I feel like questions like this are a sign of development, you know.
Right.
Like I think I'd be worried if I didn't have this kind of question, and it's so basic, you know.
Yeah.
That's the real crisis. If you don't realize you're going through a crisis, like the crisis that's going on that like you're being harmed by and you don't actually realize it, you know.
What do you mean?
Meaning like if you don't realize that you're not asking questions, that you're just coasting, you know.
When you realize that, then that's a crisis.
No, when
Or
you
that's
don't
just
realize
basic,
that, then you're objectively in crisis.
Uh-huh.
You know, like the
Uh-huh.
unexamined life is like
I
a
see.
crisis, you know.
I see.
So I'm happy about this.
Uh-huh.
The only frustration is the fact that that the only frustration is that's messing up the pristine, like we almost had Tehilim. We almost had Hallel, you know, and like this could have come from anywhere. Like this is not like
Right.
you know, this is like it's just like I would have liked to like get this in the book, but that's just like a perfectionist tendency. That's not a crisis even. It's just like a frustration, you know.
When we do get it, it'll be better,
If we get it.
presumably.
Yeah, if we get it, yeah. All we do is the models, yeah.
I do have a fantasy of like dropping this and like coming back to it in like 10 years.
That's the great thing is that happens.
Yeah.
You know, like and like you haven't had enough. You haven't had well, neither have I. I've had 10 years. No, I've had about 10 years. I've had about 10 years. You know, but like it's good to be able to say that and like actually have that rooted in experience.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, I can come back to this in 10 years and like actually see stuff. And not only have I had the 10 years, but like I have like, you know, records.
Right.
And like the records help, you know, but yeah.
Of like where you were 10 years from.
Yeah, right. Whether it's like blog posts or like blog posts or that's all I have back then. But now I've got recordings, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of times you remember it. You remember the last time you went to it. Yeah. Let's table this and then try to get the perek though, because I don't think this is dependent on. I don't think the getting of the main idea of the perek is dependent on this one point. The main point of the perek is Hodu.
Okay. Right.
And if we're wrong, then we're wrong.
Okay.
You know.
Right.
Yeah. And I also, just for the sake of expediency, we were going to do the defining each cluster. I think we should look at a bird's eye view though.
Mm.
So let's look at the whole perek, and so we have our initial observation about the back and forth between David acting and then Hashem acting. So that still was a good idea. So we have the idea of Hoda, and the idea of Hoda carried its way through. And then we have the idea of the progression from either David's Sarah to his redemption or Klal Yisrael's Galus to their redemption,
Right.
And that seems to be the main theme, but that doesn't square with our idea about the relationship with God. And we were also bothered by the idea of our relationship with God because not the idea of that relationship, but the fact that like this not happy-go-lucky, this positive like venue of like just thanks and like bad stuff's happening, like the bees and the burns and like but like I'm thanking God. That didn't really seem like the best way to convey this idea of like it's torturous, not torturous, but like this back and forth, like I constantly need to be adapting type thing. Like something was not jiving with that.
What do you mean adapting?
Meaning that what we were saying with the idea, oh, you know what? Hold on. So I put this these plans. Sometimes you have these plans, and there's so many options that you just don't follow through with any of them. So I had this excerpt. Where did I keep it? Hold on just a second. That I was going to send you. And by you, I mean the group. And by the group, I don't know what I mean, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to send it, but I didn't want you to know what it was about. And I wanted to see what you thought it would be about, because it could be about lots of stuff that we're learning and talking about. But let me read it and see if I can find it here. Oh no, that's parts. Yeah. Did I not even take a picture? Did I not go that far? Maybe I didn't. Maybe I just planned it. Hold on. I thought I did. Did I make a PDF? I thought I made a PDF. Let me look at my PDFs. Oh man, maybe I didn't. All right, well, I'll have to do that later. All right, I didn't. Okay, fine. But what I meant was the fact that a relationship with God, just like a relationship with a human being, is not static, and that you always have to be. It's not just like you put in your effort and then you get the response. It's that you constantly have to be adapting to what God is doing for you and what your circumstances are, and then how you respond, and then that elicits another response from God, a different response from God, and then how you respond. And it has to be it's a dynamic relationship. It's not a static relationship. Even though, and that's the irony, is that even though God's unchanging, then because the way that you relate to Him is constantly changing, then you need to be constantly changing. Then I thought that's what we were saying. The idea was of the pivot, the only pivot we found, which like terrifies me if that's not the pivot. That's crisis. Yeah. No, yeah, but yeah, because that's still I really like that pivot.
It is.
And the other thing that bothers me, this is why we get everything on the table here. The other thing that bothers me is 117 was a great conclusion to this whole thing. Like Yemot HaMashiach, bam. Now we're going back to us being in distress and Sarah and like, or all the way back to the beginning of Malchus Beis David and like his struggle. Why are we going back here? Now you can argue. I think the best argument we made is that this is where we're at now, and this is what's going to be necessary for us to get to that point of Mashiach. And you could argue that you needed to have this pristine depiction of the time of Mashiach before this in order to see what we're aiming at, of this time where the entire world is united in Yedias Hashem, and we're all recipients of God's chesed, and that's waiting there. That's like Tehilim Chasto, but like we are over here in Galus or like in oppression, and like we have to like connect to that source of Tov in order to be able to partake of that.
I mean, in order for both of the Tov to be the only good, you need to know what the Tov is that you're in.
Right. Bingo.
Is it possible this is just a summary of what came before? Like summing up the it's expanding on the Yemos and Shion thing, like what that looks like.
Well, it is saying how we got there.
Yeah.
It's not really saying, I mean, I guess the end part is saying what it looks like of everyone turning to God and bringing stuff to the base of Mikdash and thanking him and like how wondrous it is. But it's more, 117 was more about the state of Yemos Mashiach. This is more about the emergence of Yemos Mashiach, the transition. Right, like all the nations, the kings saying like, "Oh, this can only come from God," and like people going to the base of Mikdash and the Kohanim like getting, resuming their roles. So let's shortcut it and see if that works. Which is so we've been focusing on the question, what's the main idea? Like, what's the point? The main point. Let's focus on what of it and what is the purpose of it. And maybe that'll be a backdoor to get into like what the main idea is. So like, what are you getting out of saying this? And maybe this would be a good opportunity to just rev up in terms of the previous prakim. So I don't know if you need a Tanakh to look at the previous prakim or if you have them in your mind. Up to you. That was not like a command. That was just an FYI. 113 was the first one. I think 113 was the first one.
Back to the page.
No, in Tehilim. I'm not gonna. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll just say this. What?
107 is mentioned in upside down.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought those were only
Yeah.
two. Yeah. All right. Okay. So 113. That was about God ruling over the social order, right? And because he is the cause of the universe and he can do whatever he wants, then the social order that we feel is fixed is not really fixed. And like the poor person can become a nobleman, and the barren woman can become a mother of kids. So that's breaking us out of the realm of like Malchus Adam, of like of human rulership and human supremacy. Okay. Then you've got B'Seitzer Mitzrayim, that's God ruling over the natural order, right? That God can make the sea part and the mountains skip and change the water into rock, right? So that's absolute rulership. Then you've got 115, which is the Ovdei Avodah Zarah put their trust in these dead idols and project all these powers onto them and take security in them. But really their idols can't do anything, and that's like retreating from reality. But we recognize the cause of all reality, and we put our trust in him. And because we put our trust in him and we devote our lives to recognizing his truth, then God will bless us and sustain us and help us to defeat the Ovdei Avodah Zarah. And the fact that they see us and they say, "Oh, where's your God?" That's just like short-sightedness on their part, and that's not indicative of reality. Then 116, that was 115. So 116 is techniques that we use in order to solidify our trust in God. So those were all of the things of
Like
talking to your soul, recognizing your soul as your essence, realizing like the Pesci that you have no other hope but to turn to God, making a neder, paying it back in public, thanking God publicly. All of these things are strengthening making the ideas real to you, at every phase of what you're doing. Making plans about your avodas Hashem in order to when you're in a state of Torah, to strengthen the fact that like that's really what matters to you. That was zooming in on David and Melech as an example of someone who's like living that way. 117 is saying the culmination of Malchus based David, which is the Yemos Mashiach, and then our prayer, 118. So again, it seems to take a few steps back because it's talking about the lead up to Yemos Mashiach. And it still bothers me, 25. Ana Hashem Hoshiana.
Why is that bother you?
Because it feels out of place. It feels like at this point we should not be asking God to save us. It feels like we were saved already, And what did the Radak say? The Radak said that it's all those who come to take shelter in God's shade and return to his service. I don't know if I like that.
Yeah, I feel like say, I think what Zed was suggesting that like this is like kind of like recapping it for us almost like kind of giving us like it seems like it's out of place because we've been building up like good, we're going to everything's good, praising God, and then like in the middle here we have like just stuff that seem out of place. But if you're saying that this is kind of just like giving us a recap, like leading up to
Why?
I haven't.
Yeah.
Well, basically, this whole progression has been. It seems like it's um, sort of like different stages and going from one thing to another and like progressing on and like you sort of leave what happened before behind. Um, but this perek is sort of saying that all the different stages that came before are really sort of like the relationship that we have with God sort of um, is not. It sounds fluffy, I guess, but not bound by time, I guess.
Mhm.
Like all the ideas that we're talking about are not about specific areas or
Mhm.
about about these days of crime or about
Mhm.
US Mashiach or
Mhm.
whatever or about David even. Like
Mhm.
it's sort of all these things, all these like time periods are now like being meshed together to show that they're sort of like it's not they're not distinguished by time. That's
Mhm.
not the important factor here. Even
So-
if there is technically there is a progression.
Okay, so can I remind you of something that hopefully will complement what you're saying?
Mhm.
That was one of the possibilities that the Radak mentioned with Hodu Lashem Ki Tov Kilo and Chosto. The fact that that he promised us good and like the good was there waiting to be actualized, and even though there are like 2,000 years in between or more than 2,000 years in between, then like it didn't extinguish that good.
Yeah.
And that is very much in line with the idea of Hodu L'Shem Kito Kilo and Hoso, the way we explained it, with the fact that like God is the unchanging source of good, and therefore there is a timelessness in the good that He bestows that only is delayed or in flux because of our deficiencies.
Mhm.
You know.
And that explains the because it's and all of it really like you're sort of like just like even like in this that part of the perek that's like talking about like that we're like praising God because we were saved and all that. And, like that's in Yom Mashiach, but then it like jumps right back into the colors.
Right. Yeah, we said something like that earlier that that like the or not like that, but that again that complements that is like there's a danger of like the complacency of being a recipient of the good and then like feeling like okay now we've made it, you know. And when you're talking about Yom Mashiach, that could be a pitfall, and the fact that you still are in need of salvation and assistance for success.
Right, like these things don't change when Mashiach comes. Like they're sort of like they're just all these ideas and like the back and forth, that whole thing of like the dynamic relationship.
Yeah.
Like still applies in most Mashiach. Like
so the way I view it, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that, but like I don't think we need this for Yom Mashiach. I think in the Yom Mashiach, then when you have Yediyas Hashem, then everyone will see this clearly. So I think what we need we need to talk about Mashiach in a way that punctures our fantasies about Yom Mashiach now. Yeah.
Right, like we have to recognize that in this way, it's no different than now. Like it's not going to be different than now in this, like this constantly having to act in your relationship with God. It's never gonna
because that's part of being a of knowledge, the quest of knowledge of God and relating to God, right?
I feel like that would also describe why it starts and ends with Hodu Lashem Ki Tov, because like even though these things are still going to be like happening, there's still going to be this back and forth and things that we have to do, and like even if that means that like you end up slipping or whatever, like it's still expressing this idea that no matter what, God is eternally good.
Yeah. So can we transition from that into what should we have in mind when saying this,
Right. Yeah.
especially as the culmination of Hallel?
Right.
And we can't lose the fact that it's Hodu. And it's weird because it's Hodu on stuff that hasn't happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Not that it's excluding stuff that has happened, but the event that this is Hodu about, if we talk about Yom Mashiach, hasn't happened yet.
Right. I mean, maybe the idea is just that, right? That and it also fits with the fact that it's David's salvation and also our salvation. That the Yom Mashiach salvation is not intrinsically, which I guess we've just been saying this whole time, but like, I don't know if this is the idea, but just like another point is that salvation is not different than any other salvation. It's just bigger, the biggest salvation, right? And yeah, I guess maybe right.
Are you saying that because this is being used dually for David and Yom Mashiach?
Yeah.
Or are you saying just the mechanisms, like the nature of the salvation and such, that it has to be like this partnership effort?
Yeah, it just has to be that way. And I think the fact that they're putting this after, like, we go through the whole progression and get, like, we sort of show, not the history, I guess, but we just, whatever. Up until this point, we, like, ended with Yom Mashiach, and now we have this thing, which is not like specifically tied to any time period. I mean, like, this is just like an essential feature of the relationship with God. And yeah.
But in the same way that we experience salvation from God before, like we're going to experience salvation from God again, and like don't think just because this is like the largest scale salvation that like this is the end. Like
Not satisfying to me. Not on par with the other ideas for the other Braken. That's the thing that's bothering me. And not on par with the progression. Meaning, independently, if we only had this perek, I would feel dissatisfied. And then Kal V'chomer, as the culmination, given the progression, it doesn't fit. Nice ideas independently, though.
anyone's listening to this podcast, they probably think that we just like this is
Yeah. This is a cume in the fucking poem that says, "You silent is praise." Yeah.
Yeah.
See, the other thing, just to reiterate what I said before, but in a different way, this doesn't feel like a thank you.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Meaning the first 4 psukim sound like that,
Right.
and like the last couple of psukim sound like that. Like all the middle stuff sounds like it's giving ideas about how to relate to God when you're in a state of distress. And that doesn't feel like a thank you perek. And like this Hodu L'Shem Ki Tov sounds like a thank you perek. Yeah.
Maybe I mean, I don't know if this is going to explain everything, but just explaining what the thank you is in reference to the rest of the pasuk is that maybe it's the idea we were saying before about the Tov, in terms of your standing in terms of objective good and how much external things you have. The only response to what you have, what let's say if you're living in a time of emotion, times of whatever, like in terms of those external things, the only response to that is like Hodu for what you have.
Yeah.
And
That I liked.
Yeah.
Now let's just run with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
Yeah. And then right. And that's sort of like the background for your, like, I mean, what you're really focusing on is what's in the middle, and that's like what makes up the most of your thought process. But it's like,
Can we say, no, sorry,
yeah, okay.
could that framework affect your bakashos?
What do you mean?
Meaning that if that's the framework in which you're thanking God for, like, thank you for for providing me with all these opportunities to choose the good, you know, so then you are going to relate to this times when you're in the Meitar calling on God, you know, and like you're surrounded by enemies and the bees and stuff. You are going to relate to that differently because that's the framework that you're thanking God for. Like, let's say you only thank God for saving you from harm. So then when you're in a state of distress, you're not going to thank God until he saved you, you know. But if you're thanking God for being the unchanging source of good that you can choose at any time, you know, if that's your overall framework, then that doesn't change when you're in a state of tsara or distress or galus or whatever, you know. And when you ask God for stuff, it's not going to negate you from asking God for stuff, because you could still, you know, there's still ways to give you access to greater good, and only God could do that. But like you won't falter in your gratitude.
So yeah, I guess
Which is like why there's a positive attitude in throughout this entire thing, even though David's talking about states of distress he was in.
right. I guess it would have made more. I mean, I wanted to frame it as instead of like, please give me good or something.
Yeah.
Oh, also the Anant and Moshiana kind of speaks to that point that even when he has the physical success, he's still asking to be
Right.
because that's not the physical success is not.
That's not the end.
Anymore.
Yeah, right. In fact, that could be a pitfall. Right?
Yeah. Clarifying what you're looking like, what would satisfy you? Are you're looking for a specific practical sort of like point that would like affect like
Well, that's Adler's fourth question, but that's not even what I'm looking for. I'm looking for less than that, which is something to unify the perek. And it's in Adler's first question.
Yeah.
I mean, thank God we got all this.
Right.
But I do feel like what the idea I just said does lend itself to a practical thing, which is that I think we think of Hoda as coming after you receive what you asked for in your bakasha. But what this is showing is that Hoda is foundation for being mavakesh in a different way. Yeah, this is the foundation of bakasha. Because when you're thanking God for enabling you to live as a bocher b'tov, then it doesn't matter as much if you get what you're asking for. It doesn't matter in that. In other words, if you don't have this framework, then the only thing that matters is you get what you're asking for. But you see, David is saying that when he doesn't get what he's asking for, that's Mutzar Hashem, and that's also good, you know, and that he's going to still live and praise God, you know.
Because he has the ability to choose good.
Yeah. So we'll change your bakashos.
Because right.
And the idea also that God is the unchanging source of good, and that the only reason that you don't have the good is because you haven't aligned yourself with it. That also changes your bakashos. You know, that changes you from a passive mavakesh of like, I'm putting out my request and I want you to answer it, to an active seeker of the good, you know?
Were you saying before that this also affects your Hoda, this perspective?
Well, it definitely affects your Hoda, because you're also now not thanking God just because you got what you wanted. You're thanking God because he is good, and he is good and does good, and that the good that you're seeking is to be able to choose the good. Like even when you don't get the particular that you want, then you still have all of the circumstances that he gave you that enable you to choose the good. And that's why I'm using like Mutzar Hashem as the example of that, because you suffered, but the suffering gave you insight and lessons and help you to do tshuva, and that's good.
So I'm not sure if you already like said this and moved past this, but I think that is a pretty like nice and meaningful idea that this thanks is mixed with like struggles, you know,
Yeah.
and it's part of the way the thanks is.
Right. Let's say, like in this case, and the only thing that's half facetiously, like we can thank God for the fact that we don't have an answer to this, because how disastrous would it be if we walked away from this thinking that we knew the good?
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.
You know?
Disasters.
Yeah.
And this is lending it us to like spending more time delving deeper and developing
Yeah.
new ideas. And,
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, like clearly, let's put it this way. Clearly, we're not ready to see the idea yet.
Mm.
Because if we were, we would see it. But we
Yes.
wouldn't,
That's
I think so, because the good's always out there. The only lack is in us. Well, it's in either me, you, or you. You know?
right.
Like it's not the idea is out there
Idea is out there.
waiting to be seen, you know. So there's some lack in us, you know, and we're not seeing it. But now we know that we're not seeing it.
And
And that's
thankful
good.
for that.
Yeah, I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
Because before we did this perek, I didn't know that I had this particular big gap in my understanding of the good,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so now I'm aware of it, and that's the good. I'm just using this as an example.
Right.
It's not the main idea of the perek.
Wait, well, what? Yeah, why not?
Why is it not the main idea of the
Yeah.
perek? Because he doesn't mention this in the perek.
Yeah, no, it's just Hodu, like he says Torah and Ki Tov,
Oh.
and then the whole middle is just like low Yura because I'm have whatever because that all
Yeah.
I care about is being low for myself.
Oh, in that sense, yeah, this is the main idea of the perek.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I meant that the thing I'm looking for in the perek.
Oh.
This is not that.
Wait,
I mean, I still don't feel like I understand the perek in terms of its place in Tehilim or like what its
Oh.
purpose is.
okay,
And this gratitude that I'm expressing now is not that.
it's not the idea,
It's not the idea.
but it is what the part of what the perek
Part of what the perek is about. Yeah, it's definitely a theme in the perek.
Okay,
Yeah,
but not the main.
not the main theme. Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully, we live to Shavuos, right?
Yeah.
That's the next time we say Hallel.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I think let's call it a wrap for now, and you know, thankfully Tehilim's not going to change,
Yeah.
and you know, and we recited enough that maybe one day when we're reciting it, we'll see the idea here, but we've prepared the soil, you know,
Right.
and planted stuff.
The wolves are out there.
Yes, the wolves are out there. All righty, next time we'll do a different perek.
Okay.
Let's see what that is.
Cool.
Okay.